Oh dear, that's an image gonna...
The smokers have won, but in this battle, the smoke hasn't cleared.
The 80s was a very different place. Spielberg's E.T. had kids pouring into theaters, Michael Jackson's Thriller was making waves on MTV, and the internet had just launched a support communication system for scientists. Amidst these events, the social sphere in the 80s was a bit crude and less regulated. People pretty much did whatever they wanted. Here are things from the 1980s that are not socially acceptable today.
Raise your container to us and to Sabre.
Now, believe it or not, in the early 80s, office drinking was not uncommon. You could pop open your favorite brand of alcoholic beverage during a break and not get in trouble for it. Of course, as time progressed, it began to decline as workplace etiquette and standards became more defined, and it became common sense not to do so at work. Today, drinking in the workplace is not only forbidden, it can get you out the door faster than you can say paycheck. Along with drinking, other offenses like using endearing terms while addressing females in a professional setting also raises eyebrows and can certainly get you in serious trouble. It may have been overlooked in the 80s as merely getting along, but today it's categorized as undermining, inappropriate, and as a form of harassment.
Bulldog tradition.
Streak, 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 streak.
My arm's in a cast, man.
If you thought that was bad, what about the insanely embarrassing act of streaking? Huge sporting events in the old days were never complete without one or more streakers running across the field in their birthday suit while being chased and tackled by a team of security guards. It was never fully understood why they did it, but the most plausible reasons were a dare, a protest, or simply just for fun. Streaking became so popular that college students organized it to mark certain events, and it was more popular at colleges than outside. Streaking was used as a protest method, and the University of Notre Dame had one incident called the Streakers Olympics in the 70s, which led to an uprising between students and the campus police. The act was linked to a sexual revolution, and today, the consequences are more serious than the old days. A modern streaker could be looking at significantly large fines with some jail time.
If Ichabod only knew.
Schools in the 1980s had strict disciplinary measures and never hesitated to dish out corporal punishment with the use of things like whips and leather belts, and some even got creative. This form of discipline was widely accepted in the 80s and even backed up with religious culture. The use of such extreme methods has greatly declined and is frowned upon by many societies. Though not illegal, it's certainly socially problematic and could stir the attention of children's rights agencies. How about the lack of trigger warnings for content on TV in the old days? Even though R ratings have existed since the 60s, the focus was usually on violence, gore, and nudity, which was pretty much all the warning you got. But as time has gone on, other forms of trigger warnings that were not considered necessary in the 80s became a big deal. Other content like substance abuse, racism, ableism, homophobia, and more set up a more comprehensive system for modern viewers. These warnings became necessary, showing caution and empathy towards the general public because you just never knew who may be affected. Hitchhiking was such a thrill in the 80s that it was common to see hitchhikers on the road and normal to pick one up in the spirit of kindness. If you needed to go somewhere and didn't have money for the road trip, all you had to do was stand on the road and put out your thumb, either alone or with a group of friends. It wasn't only thrilling, it was also healthy, and some people preferred to hitchhike for the adrenaline of meeting strangers who would become mates. Hitchhiking soon became a problem when stories of missing hitchhikers and murder cases began turning up, and today it's a safety risk to pick a hitchhiker up or even travel as one.
Well, the first thing you should know is you should be wearing a helmet because your head is the most important part of your body.
Not wearing a bike helmet while riding your bike provided children a thrill that was out of this world. The experience of riding fast and feeling the wind in your hair was exhilarating, and that is if you didn't bump into anything. Wearing a helmet while riding a bike wasn't always adhered to in those days. Children who wore helmets were often jeered at or even called names, so it could be tempting to leave the head unprotected to look cool around your friends. This is no longer the case, as helmets are often enforced in certain places to make sure that bikers are safe. Diversity means a lot more to people today than it did in the 80s. For instance, many places of work today hire and operate with standards that show diversity and equal representation in the workplace. In the 80s, hiring only a single race or gender at the office was a common thing and was encouraged in certain places having a different idea of what the company image stood for. In those days, you'd see certain prestigious establishments hiring only a specific race or gender for their image and other reasons. While the status quo has changed, memories of the past will always be remembered. Men's clubs and social gatherings that excluded women were common in the 80s, especially those that were critical issues such as politics, finances, and societal structure being discussed. In the 80s, it was normal and didn't raise any eyebrows. Things have taken a turn since then, and while there are often male-dominated spaces today like sports clubs, they allow the presence of females. Thanks to the 2010 Equality Act, single-sex institutions are protected and allowed to hold activities, but also, to make sure that things are fair, women are allowed into any of these spaces at all times. Wearing animal skin in the early 80s used to be a symbol of affluence and wealth. This form of fashion dates back hundreds of years. Animal skin had fashion significance, and because they were not easy to acquire, it made the person look exotic and elegant. Imagine rocking a full animal-based attire, consisting of crocodile belts, animal fur, a feathered hat from a rare bird, and other accessories. In the 80s, you'd be considered an aristocrat. This obviously is not the case today. Animal rights agencies, in collaboration with the government, ensure the protection of animals from abuse. Letting your pet loose in the 80s was not really a big deal. Dogs were allowed to roam unhindered, and they would run and play with other dogs and find their way home when they needed a snack. Dogs could find their way to the pond, chase ducks around while taking a swim, chase the mailman a few blocks, and even do their business wherever they wanted without consequence. There was not a lot of obligation that came with owning a dog in the 80s. All you needed was to feed it, love it, and let it go for a walk. And if it still loved you, it would come back. Pets today have to be trained, groomed, and cared for, and waited on to ensure they don't cause any harm or nuisance to the public. Droppings are certainly not allowed in public spaces, and pets have to be on leashes at all time with a collar to help identify the owner. Did you know that not wearing seatbelts while driving was considered cool, daring, and hip in the 1980s? Laws weren't very strict on wearing seatbelts, and they were more like recommendations than actual law. Passengers often paid no mind to them unless necessary, and if you wore a seatbelt, you were considered to be unnecessarily paranoid. Parents would often forget to strap their children in, and if your guardian was feeling adventurous, they'd allow you to take the wheel while sitting on their lap, all without wearing a belt. Today's laws protect both the young and the old by making seatbelts absolutely necessary, and the lack of seatbelts is a third-degree crime. Do you remember a time when parents would make a quick stop at a grocery store and leave their children unattended inside the car, leaving the windows down for ventilation, and they would yell out, "Stay in the car and don't talk to strangers"? If it were a movie, the scene would rarely go well, but leaving children unattended inside the car in public places was pretty much standard and didn't seem wrong at the time. Things were much more simple then, and today, such an action exposes the child to potential harm and is considered a crime in the modern era. Prank calling has existed for quite a long time, and even though it's rarely done now, it still exists. It's just not as popular as it was in the 80s. In those days, kids having nothing better to do would sit next to the phone and dial random numbers, make up a bunch of jokes to say when someone would pick up the phone. They'd cut the call and burst into fits of laughter, leaving their victims bewildered and upset. It was a thrilling experience, and since most of the phones used in those days were rotary and retro button dial, the kids got away with their pranks. The fact that such activities are socially unacceptable today is much easier to track a prank number and bring it to justice. It's probably not worth the trouble. In the 1980s, kids could walk up to the front door of a house, ring the doorbell, and run away, leaving the inhabitants surprised and anxious when they got to the door and found nobody there. In some cases, this would happen several times a day to get the best out of this experience. This activity was purely for fun and was not tagged as a serious offense at the time. The ring and run, commonly known as the ding-dong ditch, is certainly a misdemeanor offense today and may come with other unforeseen charges depending on how unique the case is. The ring and run, of course, declined in the modern era due to various factors like doorbell cameras, watchdogs, fences, and walls. Kids loved to do all types of wacky things for fun in the 80s, and some of them were quite dangerous, but at that time they were entertaining. Mimicking pro wrestling was one activity that riled the kids up and got them excited. Imitating their favorite wrestler when hitting another person with a decapitating clothesline or dropping a suplex didn't seem like it had long-term effects, that is, until an accident happened. Parents were often spectators and even cheered their kids on, deeming it a sign of strength and manliness. Many times it would lead to a sprain, a bloody elbow, or a missing tooth, and sometimes it was worse. While these imitations seem harmless in those days, allowing young boys to express their passion for pro wrestling, it wasn't safe, and numerous adverts on television warned children of the dangers of mimicking the superstars, using the catchphrase, "Don't try this at home." Today, these attempts are frowned upon and usually reported to authorities. Have you ever heard of a chickenpox party? That's right. In the 70s and 80s, chickenpox was unavoidable and had to happen to you at some point in your life. The good thing was it could only happen to you once, and then your immune system would build a defense against the disease with memory cells that would fight it from ever coming back. In the 1980s, to ensure your children were done with the chickenpox phase of life, they could no longer be troubled by it, parents allowed their children to go to chickenpox parties. It was a get-together where the celebrant was a child who had caught it and was itching frantically with hundreds of dots on their body. Each kid only had to come close enough or touch the infected kid, and they would get infected as well. Then after that party, temperatures rise, red dots emerge, and after treatment, the infected child would be healed and done with that phase. Today, medicine has advanced to a level where we can live our lives without the itchiness of chickenpox, but these parties did bring a sense of togetherness, sharing a disease-based bond, and forever remembering the names of the people you caught the itch from. If you were a kid in the 1980s, then peanut treats like peanut butter sandwiches were usually a part of your lunchbox, with little consideration for the possibility that the kid next to you may have an allergy. Peanut butter allergies were a thing in the 80s, but awareness wasn't as widespread as today. Kids with various types of allergies had to cope with the environment in hopes that the food in the cafeteria didn't include something they may have had a severe reaction to. In these modern times, schools document all possible health problems that each child has in order to make sure that accidents don't happen. When kids went to school in the old days, some would find a way to leave early without permission, while some didn't show up at all. Truancy was quite common, though it was frowned upon in the 80s. There wasn't any way to make sure kids were in school. Many schools used disposable manual attendance sheets that could easily be altered, and the schools didn't have security walls, so skipping would be quite easy, and the consequences were not enough to keep students in check. In the modern day, there are systems put in place to ensure that all children are in school daily, with open communication with guardians to express any form of concern. The chances of winning the lottery have always been slim, so it's considered a form of gambling. It was a gamble that only adults were allowed to participate in because they understood it was akin to throwing money away and could live with the consequence. Therefore, only adults were allowed to purchase a lottery ticket. However, not in the 80s. In the old days, kids could waltz into the store and purchase a few lottery tickets on behalf of an adult. This, of course, is not possible today. You have to be at least 18 years of age with a valid ID to purchase lottery tickets. Riding in the back of a pickup truck on the main road was a common sight in the 80s. It was fun to jump in the back and feel the wind as the vehicle drove down the highways and major roads. Parents allowed their children to ride in the back, and it was the best position for road trips, allowing a panoramic view of your surroundings. However, in today's society, it gets both the driver and the passenger in trouble, especially if that passenger is a minor. For safety reasons, riding in the back just isn't acceptable. Now, believe it or not, smoking on airplanes was legal in the 80s. It was common to have a few smokers on board casually having a cigarette at a designated smoking section. These areas were created to give smokers their own space, while keeping non-smokers comfortable during the flight. However, because of the growing awareness about the health issues associated with secondhand smoke, as well as the need to keep air clean and the interior of the aircraft free of tobacco, smoking has been banned on all flights. Violation of the no smoking law attracts a hefty fine and possible jail time. The law was implemented in the 90s and 2000s, ensuring that passenger flights are free from smoke and improving the air travel experience for customers. Which of these memories do you remember the most? Let us know down in the comments below. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you never miss out on a memory in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.